Lists. If you're going to write your memoir, you're going to write a lot of lists. So your friend is a notebook, whatever that might be, because each of us has a faulty memory. I'm sure from the time that we're 12 or 13 we start forgetting things, maybe even earlier. So as the filing cabinet fills up, things go to the back of the archives and we find it hard to bring things forward. So we're going to make lots of lists. They help you remember, they help you focus, they help you find the gaps in your memory, they help you find the gaps in the story you want to tell and where more research is needed. And when you write your list, these are only the starting points. They're not the be-all and end-all of your story, but they are, in my method, in my opinion, an essential part of organising things so that you can write your own story. Some of the things you need to consider are places. Where have I lived as a child? As a teenager? Where was I as a young adult? Where was I when I had my first kiss? All of those sorts of things are important to help jog your memory. So it might be music, it might be a photo, it might be a variety of different things that you pull together that prompt your memory and you can put down at a list. What were the places like where I lived? What made them unique or memorable? People want to know a little bit more about the detail of them. They don't want to know that you were born in Sydney, died on the Central Coast, you went to school here and went to school there. Hey, we can get that from genealogical records. That's the dry historical records. It's not what you're here for. So have a look at the places. People want to know how big it was, how small it was. What did it sound like? What did it smell like? They want you to engage their senses in helping them have an understanding of what your memoir is about, what your life was like, what you were really like. When you're thinking about places, what was your home like? What was it made out of? How big was it? In today's community, people are quite surprised because they're used to having, the big house and the rumpus room and the TV room and the big LCD screen TV and all the rest of it. They forget that Nana, Pop, Uncle, Aunt, highly successful, might be living in quite a comfortable home now, may have had a more modest house, or they may have come from a mansion and come back to more modest circumstances today. People want to know what those places were like because the places help to mould the character of the person and give them a depth of understanding about that person. They also want to know whether it was different or the same as others. Help them sort of gauge the photos they see in books of houses. I mean, if you see a photo of a lot of terraced houses, did you live in a terrace house or did you live in a bungalow? What sort of house did you live in? If you ask somebody in 10, 20 years' time about your house, will they know the answer? And that's the sort of thing that people are interested in. Here's just an example of what I was saying about the different types of house.
Followed the design of the California bungalow. Had a gable and so on, but it had a living space beside the kitchen and a bathroom, and then it had a very, very small second bedroom, a decent-sized master bedroom, and a decent-sized living and dining area.
So where was your room then?
Well, I didn't have a room because Uncle Jeff had that room, so I sort of shared what was the dining room really with my sister, and my mother and father had the main bedroom, but there were no room for beds, so Uncle Jeff had a bed on the veranda and I had a bed on the veranda and my sister had a bed on the veranda when she was well enough. Otherwise she sort of had a camp stretcher in the dining room. My mother's family had dragged out from the old home country, and it was a wonderful old sideboard with curly barley sugar props on the overpiece of it. It had glass partitions with beautiful woodwork, magnificent woodwork, and egg and dart carving around the main piece of it. And my father, being an engineer, had certain bits of equipment that were favourite to him. This sideboard would often be the repository for his theodolite. And my mother's friends would come past with their noses in the air and say, "This is the only house we visit where there is a theodolite on the dining room sideboard."
So, listening to Zoe's words there, you can get the real impression about what as a young person impressed her, the house. It actually, the inflection of the voice conveys a lot more than even reading her story would, even though those words are in there. But the place, the sense of place, you can get a real sense of place of her home there, and that's something that's important to pass on depending on what type of memoir you're writing. If your place was a farm, what was it like? What was the surrounding landscape? What was the climate like? I mean, in Australia we're used to talking about drought, but were they wet years? Were they drought years? What happened during that time? So depending on what your circumstances are, it depends on what you need to focus on it. Were there livestock or crops? Who lived there? How was it run and who worked it? Sometimes it's just run by the family, sometimes there's sharecroppers or share milkers or hired hands. Again, people want to know more detail. They want to get a sense and a feeling for what it was like when you lived there. If it was a place in a suburb, a town, a city, what was that like? What was your house like? We've just talked about that a little bit. Was your home different or similar to others? What were the public buildings there? And people want to know what your impression of that place was. They can always look up a name, but they don't have much of an idea. I recently listened to a story of a lady who's in her 80s who lives in Ettalong, and she was describing what was in this location, what was in that location, going around the town, and really brought back that sense of village life, which now if you drove through you would have no idea about. But I'm sure her grandchildren and great-grandchildren will want to know what her place where she grew up was like.